Um, One of the things I have learned being a father, I've been a father now for over 12 years. I got two kids. I got the 12-year-old son, 5-year-old daughter, Liberty, and my son, Gideon. And one of the things I've always taken it as a responsibility I have with my children is to teach them how to play sports. Their mother doesn't play sports, I do, and I felt like it's my responsibility to teach them how to play sports because I loved playing sports growing up. I watched them. I have a son, my 12-year-old, who doesn't care a lick about them, and I have to sit him down once a week and be like, you will love them. But one of the things I have done, though, is I felt it's my obligation I got to teach you at least how to play these sports, whether you play them with teams or not. It's just something I want you to know how to do. So, for example, one of the things I've taught them is with Gideon, teaching him baseball and how to throw a baseball. And what you learn really quick when you're teaching your kids sports is this. Teaching your kid to play sports isn't just going out and playing a sport with them. As a father, what it becomes is it becomes a continual process of kind of refining their skills and critiquing them and recalibrating things and just teaching them how to play the sports correctly. So when it comes to baseball, my son, like some kids just learn how to throw naturally and they can throw. My son, for whatever reason, can't. Never could. Couldn't throw with any power, and I don't know what it was. So I've worked with him for years trying to figure out how to redefine his throwing motion so he can throw with power and accuracy. And it's taken a lot of work, and it's really been me sitting there after times of just going, I don't get why this isn't working. And his balls always go like this, and I'm like chucking it at him, and then his go like that. So it's having to get next to him at times and going, okay, throw it. And I see how it is. I'm like, okay, here's what you need to do. Just shift your elbow a little more. You're releasing here, and you should be releasing here. And teach him all these things. We're trying to recalibrate his natural desire of how to throw a ball. And as you do that, they get better and better, and you go, okay, now you've learned how to throw a ball after all this adjustment and recalibrating your throwing motion. But what I learned was this. If I just left it to Gideon, he would never throw a ball correctly. He would never throw it hard. No matter how much time and effort he put into it, on his own, he would never get it done. It had to be something I had to refine to help him to go, your efforts aren't going to do it alone. You just have to get smarter at how you do this. Liberty, I taught her how to play hockey already. She's 5 years old. And I put this picture up here just in case, because I know in Oklahoma you guys forget what the sport is, even though I mention it from time to time. It's where people skate on ice and they use a stick and they hit this thing called a puck and it goes in nets. And it's kind of like soccer, but it's on ice and you use a stick, all right? So I've taught her how to play street hockey because at home I have like 10 hockey sticks coming from up north and coming down here a decade ago. I still have all my hockey sticks. So we play street hockey, and with Liberty, when she first went out there trying to play hockey, not a shot in the world she can hit the puck. She's swinging over it. She's hitting the stick all over the ground. And as a father, you go, all right, I have to go over there and I have to recalibrate. I have to teach her techniques. I have to show her how to hold the stick, how to do a slap shot. Taught her how to cross-check, so if someone does something to her, she can take her stick and ram it into their necks. And it crumples their spine and they just fall to the ground. Yeah. Taught her that one. I taught her, the proper hacking of a shin. The elbow move, yes, Chrissy, the elbow, when a person comes up behind you, you elbow. So as a 5-year-old, she has all those experiences. She has those skills now. She's a true hockey player. But if I just said, Liberty, go play hockey, it wouldn't have worked. She could do it all day long. It just wouldn't work. You have to teach her how to do it. You have to recalibrate some things. Effort alone isn't going to do it. The last one, Gideon, taught him basketball. As I said, my kid's not a sports player, but I'm trying to make him at least adequate. When he would shoot a ball, he would always shoot like this. I don't even get how he learned. He would shoot, and then he would cross when he released. So his ball would always go slightly off one of the directions, because either this hand would tap it and would shoot it that way, or it would shoot it that way and it wouldn't tap it. And he would always release. And as much time as he spent out there, that's how he would always shoot. So as his dad, and that's my sport, like basketball, I would go out there and I'd have to sit with Gideon. I'm like, okay, let me see his shoot. And he'd shoot, and I'd come over and I'd correct his hands. I'd be like, this goes here. You got to get the wrist going, and you got to let that one release so you're not tipping it. And you teach him how to recalibrate his natural skill, because if you just let him do it on his own, no matter how much effort he puts into it, he's never really going to be real good at it. So what you find out in life is this. There are certain things, no matter how hard you work, if you don't have the proper technique, if you don't recalibrate things on a regular basis, it's not going to improve your ability to perform that skill, all right? And you learn that in life. And there are things in life that are the same thing. There are things in life that you just can't work yourself harder to achieve. There are certain things in life you have to recalibrate constantly in order to work more effectively at it so you can become better at that skill. Hard work alone won't achieve the results you're looking for. This morning, We are continuing this Recalibrate series we're in. And what we've been talking about is how do you form a routine in your life of recalibrating certain things in your life so that you can get better and better at them, and so you can stay on track in your life so you don't get way off over here when you desire to be over here. And how do you install this recalibrating system into your life? And as we've been discussing, recalibrating also is not about burning everything down in your life and starting over. Okay? That is called a major rehaul. That is starting over from scratch. Recalibrating is going, what things do you do okay right now in your life? And how do you recalibrate that and make it better? How do you get better at it? So that's what we're looking at, because as you learn that process of recalibrating, what you will find is you will be more successful in life hitting the marks you desire to hit in your life and the desires that God has for you to hit in your life. And you will become more and more successful at actually reaching those goals. So this is the third week that we are talking about recalibrating the church. Week 1, we talked about basically the public side of the church. And we spent time talking about when you come to church, you don't come here just looking at yourself as someone that's a spectator, that you just watch things, see how it goes, do your thing, and go home. But God desires for you to be a servant. And you need to recalibrate things in your life to become more of a servant rather than a spectator in the church. Last week, we looked at the financial side of recalibrating the church. And we talked about how you get your personal finances in order, so it frees you to get your godly finances in order, so we can all contribute to the work of God. And we talked about how through this entire body, God works through all of us as individuals to meet the needs that are in this body together, and how God orchestrates that. Today, we're going to look at the third side of the church. That is the individual side. And when I talk about the individual side of the church, what I mean is this. We're going to talk about you, we're going to talk about me, and we're going to talk about us as individuals in our walk with Christ. You see, what happens here in this church building? It is the church. But you also need to realize what happens when you leave this building is also the church as well. At best, you spend 5 hours a week being a church in this building. And how I get that number is this. If you happen to go to Sunday school hour and church service, and you come back on Wednesday and you eat with us and you go to class or the kids go to programming, at best you spend 5 hours being a church in this building. That leaves you 107 hours a week where you are being the church away from this building. The way I get that number, if you're wondering, is I calculated you sleep 8 hours a night. That leaves you 16 times 7 days a week. That brings you up to, I have 112 hours a week, okay? So you have 5 hours you're being the church here. You have 107 hours you are being the church away from this building. In that 107 hours, we are called by God to be disciples of Jesus Christ as individuals, but we're also called by God to make disciples for Jesus Christ. The word disciple simply means this. It means to be a student or a follower of Jesus Christ. So God says, in your 107 hours away from here, you are to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. You are to be a student. You are to be a follower of Jesus Christ in your life out there in that world. In Matthew 28, verses 19 through 20, we have what's called the Great Commission. How many of you have heard those words, Great Commission? Okay. If you've been around the church for a decent amount of time, you've heard the words of Great Commission. I'm going to read you that scripture that's referred to as a Great Commission. But we see this call by Jesus Christ going, you are to be disciples and you are to make disciples as individual followers of mine. Here's what he says. He says, therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and in the Son and the Holy Spirit. And then he says this. He says, teach these new disciples to obey all my commands I have given you. And be sure of this, I will be with you even to the very end of the age. All right? Here's our problem. Most of us sitting here right now, we know the Great Commission. Heard those words before. We know the Great Commission. The problem is this. Not many of us have ever experienced the Great Commission. Meaning, most of us have never been an integral part of making another disciple of Jesus Christ. Statistically, 75% of you sitting here this morning will have never have played a part in helping someone else become a disciple of Christ. That's what statistics show of Christians in America, is 75% of us will never play an integral part of leading someone else to Jesus Christ and helping them become disciples of Jesus Christ like we are ourselves. And because of that, we are actually missing out on one of the greatest aspects of our relationship and our walk with Jesus Christ. Jesus says this in John 4. He says this. He says the fields are already ripe for harvest. What he's talking about here is Jesus is talking about winning people to Christ. And he's going, the world's already ripe for you to win them to me, to make them disciples. And he says, the harvesters, which are us, are paid good wages. And the fruit they harvest is people brought to eternal life. Then he says this, and it's key. He says, what joy awaits both the planter and the harvester alike. One of the greatest joys you will ever have being a Christian and being a disciple of Jesus Christ is leading someone else to be his disciple. If you have done that personally, you know it is the most rewarding experience you have in your walk with Jesus Christ. It's incredible because you know God has used you to do something eternal in someone else. And it's an incredible moment. But yet 75% of us will never experience that happening in our lives. And there are reasons for that. There are reasons we don't experience being successful in this area of our faith. So what I did this week, I went to a research company, and they've actually researched this. And they found the top 10 reasons. They put a survey out. They had, I think, like 205,000 responses back from Christians. And they just said, Christians, most of you don't make disciples. Tell us why. We just want you to give an honest answer. What are the reasons why you aren't successful making disciples? These are the 10 reasons they gave. I want to cover them with you. And I want you to just think in your own head, how many of these apply to you, or how many of these things do you think in your head? So here they are, the top 10 reasons we fail. The first one is this. They don't have a sense of urgency to reach the lost. And what they mean by that is a majority of Christians who don't make disciples go, I don't really see it as a pressing matter. I understand the Great Commission. I understand that's what my role is. But in all honesty, it's not something that I pursue on a daily basis because I think I can get to it some other day down the road. Okay, that's what they're saying. They don't spend time with lost people. The second highest response was, I'm just not around lost people. I just hang out with Christians. All my friends are Christian. Everyone I hang out with is Christian. I don't have much time where I spend time with non-believers. And so obviously I'm not making new disciples because everyone around me is a disciple. Next one is, and this is interesting, people said, third one, they are lazy and apathetic about the call to make disciples. Basically what they admitted is this: I just don't really care. I don't want to put the time into it. I'm apathetic about it. It doesn't really concern me a whole lot. So yeah, I see that in the scriptures, but it's not something that really bugs me. It's not something that really concerns me. Number 4 was, they think an effective strategy is they come rather than we go. Let me explain what that means. One of the things they found is this: most Christians think the effective strategy of making disciples is getting people to come here to be with us, rather than what we know from studies and we just know from human interaction. The most effective way to make disciples is we leave here and we go to them. That's the most effective strategy. And they said a lot of Christians have just kind of warped this and went, the most effective thing is just getting them here into this building and just invite them to church. And going, no, the most effective thing is you are a disciple of Christ and you teach them about Jesus Christ in your own life in 107 hours you're away from this place. Okay? That's another thing they found. This one, they think it's the role of the pastor and the paid staff to be the ones that make disciples. Okay? They found a lot of churches that people go, well, that's not actually something for me. That's something the minister's supposed to do and the staff. That's why we pay them. Okay? We pay them to make disciples. That's not our role. They get paid to do that. You don't pay me to do it. They get paid to do it. Here's the next 5. They think the church is about getting my needs met rather than reaching the lost. Is that a lot of Christians have internalized the church and just went, the church is specifically there just for me to meet my needs. And I don't care about winning the lost because I need my needs met. I've got my own issues. I don't have time to focus on someone else's issues. The next one, the church doesn't focus them on it. One of the things they found is a lot of Christians go, my church doesn't talk about it. My church doesn't encourage it. My church never really tells me that's my role. So it's just not something talked about. Next one, they are afraid to share with people out of fear of being labeled politically incorrect. This was interesting. A lot of Christians responded, I'm afraid to share my faith because I'm afraid I'm going to offend people, and I'm going to offend them. They're going to see me as an angry person and a jerky person because I'm going to offend them, because I'm going to have to say some things that they might not like to hear. I'm going to have to say some things where I determine rights and wrongs. So I'm just afraid to actually speak about my faith, so I'm just not going to. The next one they found is they're too busy with other things in their life to spend time making disciples. These were the people that said, I understand what God says, I understand what my role is. I just don't have time. My life is too full with other stuff. I don't have time to focus on making disciples personally. I just don't have that in my schedule, so I can't do it. The last one they found was this. They fear they don't have a clue of what to say and are not capable of helping someone become a disciple. This is the one where the Christians just go, I'm afraid I get into a conversation, I have nothing to say. I don't even know how to articulate my faith. I just feel like I would be lost. They might ask me questions that make me look like an idiot. So I just don't have the knowledge to even get into that conversation, so I'm not going to share my faith. Now, let me ask you this question. How many of you can relate to at least two or more of those things on that list? Raise your hand. Okay, that's almost everybody in here. And that's what they found in the church. So you understand what these people are saying. And here's the thing. I don't think making disciples is as hard as we often make it out to be in the church. I personally think the leaders in the church, including myself, we've actually overcomplicated it at times and made it harder for you to actually be the people God called you to be and make the disciples that God has called you to make. What our typical response is when we find out people aren't making disciples is usually we go, we need to provide you more information so that you can answer more questions that people might ask you, right? We need to give you more stuff. And you need to know the stuff I have in my head. You need to know that. And we just pile stuff on you. And so what our solution usually is somehow it's got to be, you got to work harder at it. You need more information. You need to get yourself better prepared. You need to do those things, and you need to be more effective at making disciples of the people around you. But here's what I've started to realize. The real solution isn't you working harder in most situations. The real solution is recalibrating how you think about making disciples so you work smarter. That's the real solution. It's not always about working harder. It's about working smarter. It reminds me of playing racquetball. I remember there's a guy, Arnold. What was Arnold's last name? What was it? Arnold Brown. Okay. Do you guys know what racquetball is? Racquetball, if you're not aware, because not many people get to play it. Racquetball, it's an enclosed room with high walls, and it's those little blue rubber balls and a racket, like a tennis racket, but it's like a small tennis racket. And you go in and you hit the ball against the wall, and you try to score on the other guy by making it hit twice on the floor before the other guy can get to it. And I remember this guy, Arnold Brown. I was probably 25, 26, so I was in my physical peak at that point. This is back in the day. Just so you know, that's not when I was 40. This is back when I was still playing basketball, probably 3 hours a day. I could just run and run and run. I could just go. I was at my physical peak. And this guy at the time was probably mid-60s when I went to go play him. And he looked kind of frail to me. I mean, he didn't look that great in shape. So I remember him going, you want to go play racquetball? Because I was back in town or something. And I was with my dad or something. I was like, sure, I'll go play racquetball. And I'm sitting there thinking as we go into this gym, I'm like, it's going to scorch this guy. I just need to kind of take it easy on him. He's going to have a heart attack. This is when I'm younger. Now I'm 40, 65. You go, that's not that old. But back when you're 26, 65, you're like, I'm just going to kill this guy in this little room. So we get in there, and I still remember this. I'll never forget this day. We get in there, and he's like, you ready? I'm like, yeah. He's like, you think you're going to beat me pretty bad? I'm like, yeah, I'll take it easy the first couple games so I find out what your skill level is, and then I'll just try to match so we can have a competition. And I remember in their game one, he just runs me ragged. And I just still remember this because it's all about, there's these lines. I forget all the rules now, but there's these lines on there. I remember game one, he beats me 21-3. And I swear to you, this man didn't move more than 2 steps at any time in the whole game. And he would just be like, dink, I'm running around, I'm sweating by the end of the game. I'm like, holy crap. And I'm like, what's the score? And he's like, it's game point 3. And I'm like, heck. So I'm doing that. I'm running all around this thing, whacking the thing, trying to whack it off the back wall, stuff like that, get done. He never moves. We go through 3 games. I don't think I scored over 5 in any of the 3 games. And I'm like, this is the dumbest game ever. I'm not going to play this game anymore. But what I remember is this. I remember sitting there thinking, unless I learn how to play this game better and smarter, it doesn't matter how much effort I give. This guy's going to kill me every single time. Because he could just sit there and he could dink it in the corners and it'd ding, 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 ding. And I'd be like, I'm diving for it, trying to scoop it off the ground. And he'd just be like, dink. And I'd be trying to run back. And you just realize I could work as hard as I wanted. I'm never going to beat this guy. I'm going to lose every single time. If I'm going to compete with him, I have to learn this game. I have to recalibrate how I'm doing this thing. I've got to figure out how to work it smarter rather than harder, because obviously he's not working real hard to beat me right now. The same thing holds true for our walk with Christ and making disciples, is just putting more effort into it. Doesn't always just pay off. And my fear is what's happened to us a lot of times. We've heard we're supposed to go make disciples, and we work harder at it, and we come up with a system how we're going to work harder, and we're going to do it more harder, I'm going to give more effort, and it doesn't pay off, and then we just get defeated. And what happens is, what I think we need to do is back off of that a little bit. Go, let's learn how we work a little smarter. Okay, it's not just about working harder, it's not about giving more time, it's about being smarter about how you do it. We need to recalibrate how we go about this. So here is what I'm going to ask you to do. All of you should have, and when you have it, if you've got a card with you, just hold it up. It's not being used for what you think it is. If you have one, hold it up so we know everyone has one. If you don't have one, somebody pass one from a seat next to you if you don't have one. You should have one of these cards. Okay? These are little invite cards. They're actually out on the Welcome Center all the time out there. We're not using them for that reason this morning. I'm just letting you know they're out there, and I need you to have something you can write on. Here's what I want you to do today and going into this week. Something very simple. I want you, before you come back here next Sunday, you can write it right now, you can write it when you leave here, you can do whatever. I want you to get a name that God has put on your heart of someone that's not a believer in Jesus Christ, that's not a disciple of his, that you want to target this year to lead to Christ. So all I want you to do, very simple, is you get a name, you write it on there, and just put it on the back of this card. So you can do that today. Half of you right now probably already have a name, and you're like, I've thought about them for a long time, so you write it down. I want you to put a name on your card, and I want you to have that. Now, that person might be a colleague, it might be a family member, it might be whatever. There's some of you sitting in here this morning, it might be your name. In all honesty, you're not a disciple right now of Jesus Christ, and you've known it's probably something you got to get right in your life, and you've thought about, but you've never done anything with it. You might need to write your own name on there, okay? But you write a name on here, and here's what I would ask you to do with that, is after you get that, you need to stick this. This is why I gave you a business card. You need to stick that in your wallet. You need to stick that in the back of your phone. You need to stick that in your purse, maybe in your car somewhere, someplace that you would see this regularly. Those of you that still have your little red card of sin, you know where that effective place is, that you still have it from like 3 years ago. Stick this with it. And then you can like counterbalance it and be like, I'm doing something good to get rid of my little red card of sin. That I never intended to last 3 years long. So if you're still stuck with that, I'm so sorry. And someday when you stand before God, you can just hand it to him and be like, please get rid of this, because Scott put this on me like 50 years ago. Write a name, stick it in your wallet, stick it in your purse, stick it somewhere that you will see it regularly. And here's what you're committing to. In 2016, I'm going to learn how to be smarter to try to help these people become disciples of Jesus Christ. That's what you're thinking about. That's what you're committing for. I want you to target something, because so often I think we like do the shotgun thing where we just shoot short distances all over sprayed, and sometimes we need to be snipers. Sometimes we need to be able to take that thing where we can target out the whole crowd things and go, that's that person I'm going to be focused on, and I'm going to hit that target. So get that name on there, and then here's what I'm asking you to do that's very simple. I'm not asking you to hand this card to that person and invite them to church. I could really care less about that, all right? Here's what I'm asking you to do. Every day or on a regular basis, when you see this card or whatever, you pray for this person for the next year. You don't have to worry about going to talk to them right now. Right? You just pray for them. And here's what you're praying for. You're praying for a few things. Number one, you can just pray that God would open their hearts to hear the message of who Jesus Christ is. You can pray that God would give you opportunities to speak about your faith to them. You can pray that God would use you to impact their lives. But what I really want you to be focused on is that name, and I just want you to be focused on prayer. And let me tell you why. Prayer works. Okay? Prayer works. Prayer is not just a little fantasy thing you do in your head or with a group. Prayer works. And let me tell you why prayer works. Because you're speaking to a living God. Okay? If God is dead and there is no God, and Jesus Christ isn't God and he's not your Savior, then prayer has no value to it. It doesn't work at all. But if Jesus Christ is the Savior of the world and God is alive and he's still active in this world, prayer is the most effective thing that you have in your arsenal to win people to Jesus Christ. So you pray and you make it very simple. And here's why you also pray. Prayer is not about working harder. Prayer is about working smarter. All right? because you take the creator of the universe and you go, I'm going to attach myself to your power, your influence, your ability to get things done, and I'm going to rely on you to do it rather than me. And so often in evangelism and discipleship making, we make it all about how hard we can work and our clever ways to do things. And I think a lot of times we've overcomplicated it, and you need to get back to the simple basics, which is your strength comes from Jesus Christ. Your strength comes from the power of God. So you write that name, you pray to him and go, God, you open the doors. God, you make things simple. God, you make things that I can act on and I can respond to. And then what we're going to do for the next 3 weeks, here's a church. After you have that name, you should have that by next week. We're going to re-look at our church's purpose statement. It's on the front of the bulletin and all that. But the reason we're going to look at that for the next 3 weeks, we're going to take those 3 areas, which is representing Jesus, honoring God, following the Spirit's lead. Those things are there for 2 reasons. 1, that's how we become a disciple. 2, it's how we make other disciples. So we're going to take the next 3 weeks and we're going to simplify, not about working harder, but just being the people God called us to be and how God will use that to help us make other disciples. And I just want to read to you from Matthew chapter 4, because some of you are still going to be sitting there going, I just can't make disciples. And you're still thinking about your 10 reasons why you can't. I want to read to you in Matthew chapter 4. It's very interesting. Jesus runs into 2 very ordinary guys. They are literally guys that would be sitting in here with us right now. They're ordinary, typical Americans, but they were typical Romans, Jewish Romans. They are typical everyday people. And here's the account. It says this in Matthew chapter 4. It says, one day as Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers, Simon, also called Peter, and Andrew. Now, how many of you have heard the name Peter before? Okay, this is the Peter you know from the scriptures. This is when Jesus first sees him. He's just one of 2 brothers. He's Simon, he's also called Peter, and his brother Andrew. They're throwing nets into the water, for they were fishing for a living. They were just common guys. Jesus called to them, so he shows up and he says this. He says, come, follow me. The first thing he says to him is this, what? Be my disciple. Right? Come follow me. Come be my disciple. Next thing he says is this, and I will show you how to fish for people. So he says, be my disciple, and then I will show you how to make disciples. Be my disciple, make disciples. And he's going to show them by this, by just watching his life. That's what we're going to look at the next 3 weeks, is just watching his life of how he did it. And if we would just model the same thing. He says, so I will, come follow me, I will show you how to fish for people. And then he says, and they left their nets at once, and they followed him. And if you know the rest of the story, those 2 guys become 2 of his 12 apostles. They changed the world. Not because they were extraordinary. They were ordinary people. But because they spent time with Jesus and they followed his path. Instead of working harder, they worked smarter by following the master. All right? And they left their nets at once. And my question to you this morning, are you willing to do that? Jesus says, be my disciple, make disciples. These guys went, I'm dropping everything and I will do that. Are you willing to do that same thing? Really, the question comes down to this. Are you willing to be the church out there where you work and live every day, rather than just being the church in here inside this building? That's a real question Jesus would be asking you. Are you willing to be the church out there where you spend 107 hours, rather than just being the church in here where you're here for 5 hours? Will you be the church in both places? And if you will, change the world. That's what he throws out. And these 2 guys go, I'm in. I'm ready. If you're in, get a name. Get back here next week. Right. Heavenly Father,